Coming up on Big Ten basketball and beyond, Purdue hits the banks and survives a scare from Rutgers. Highlights, reaction, and analysis after the nation's #2 avoids the upset. From full squads to individual stars, which players will be the difference makers when it comes to their respective teams' fates on Selection Sunday? Our experts have the right answers. Plus, the combo of good juju and Captain Clutch have Maryland back in the mix. Advanced Scout digging deep to find out what makes these Terps tick. It's time to go above and beyond. With that, we welcome you inside this edition of Big Ten basketball and beyond. No better way to finish up your week. Rick Pizzo, Raphael Davis, Mike DeCourcy, John Beilein alongside. It was a good way to finish up the week for Purdue, but not without a little bit of extra gray hair falling on the head of Matt Painter. On the road to take on Rutgers, always a tough place to play. Early on, Mason Gillis, the kick-out pass for the triple Boilers, up by 11 and rolling, now up by 10. Braden Smith, always a floor general, so much more effective lately as an offensive weapon. Smith had 9 in the first half. Boiler lead is 12. Still in the first half, it's the big fella, Zach Edey, because I'm bigger than you, I can do anything I want. Edey had 10 in the first half. The Boilers up by a baker's dozen. And then, how about a little history from the Canadian Condor? The lob from Braden Smith, over 2,000 points. Raphael, only 6 guys have done it.
That's big time. When I first met Zach Edey, his visit on campus, I didn't see 2,000 points, ranked 436 in his high school class. He's been big time his whole career.
Do not get Raphael started on high school rankings. Rutgers held to a season-low 20 in the first half, battling back in the second. Andre Hyatt, that's just tough bucket and one. Hyatt had 15, Scarlet Knights within 3. And then it's the young fella, Gavin Griffiths. Baseline jumper, good 2-point game. Ron Harper Jr. in the building. Good vibes for Rutgers? Not so much. Purdue back up by 5. It's Smith around the Edey screen, drives, gets the bucket going. Glass had 19. Boilers up by 7. And the big fella continues to just rack up the numbers. Edey finishes with 26 and 12. Purdue hangs on to win it. 68-60 is the final. Tim Brando, LaFonso Ellis, postgame with Purdue headman Matt Painter.
Matt, you had to take on some tremendous runs in that second half, but you never allowed them to get over the hump. I thought that was crucial.
Yeah, no question about it. You know, they obviously do a great job, and they have a lot of pieces. They've added a lot of pieces, you know, to their team, but defensively they're very good, very physical. They were better than us today on the glass. They only turned it over 10 times. We turned it over 15 times. So from a possession standpoint, you know, they had more possessions than we did. And that's something that we've been dominating, and we got to do a better job than that going forward.
Matt, you get a guy in Lance Jones from Southern Illinois at Carbondale. Could you talk about the impact that he's had on your team, particularly today?
Well, today, you know, he didn't make shots, but he rebounded the ball. He got a lot of assists. He did a lot of little things. He got that huge steal there. That's why we were struggling offensively. But he's been great. You know, he's got a good competitive spirit about him. You know, he plays and does a lot of winning things.
The other thing that just jumps out at us when we're watching the game develop is the quickness of your wing players, not just him, Coach, but others. I think that backcourt has gotten a lot quicker than it was in the past, and Zach is getting quality help.
Yeah, no question about it. Like, today wasn't our best day, but I think Rutgers had a lot to do with it. And just having that second guard with Lance in there with Braden, I thought Braden made some really key plays in the game. But, yeah, having that balance. Like, we have really shot the ball well. Today we didn't. And can you win a game right when you don't shoot the ball well? And obviously in a tough environment today, we were able to pull it out.
And, Matt, I've known you for a long time now. You're always kind of pushing your guys to improve in certain areas. What's the next step for this team?
I think, you know, just to embrace the physicality of the game and make plays. Like, we had some guys on our front line today, like, didn't get rebounds. Like, we got to be able to rebound the basketball and dominate it all time on the interior and then take care of the basketball. We have 15 turnovers. We have a team that can do both, and we've proven that we can do both. So that's really our, you know, our push is to win that possession war and put ourselves in a good position.
As Purdue usually does, they won the rebounding battle, but Matt brings up some great points. 5 of 19 from 3. They didn't take care of the basketball, but Rutgers can be a really tough place to win. So at the end of the day, how did the Boilermakers avoid the upset?
They found a way to win because they got to the free throw line 25 times. They did the unthinkable. You go on the road, play in a rack, turn it over 15 times. That led to 17 points off of turnovers for Rutgers, and then go 5 of 19 from the three-point line. That's not a recipe for success, but they got to the free throw line, which they were able to steal some points. Braden Smith was outstanding, but Lance Jones was big time. Didn't score it well from the field, but 10 rebounds, 8 assists, 5 steals. He was a difference maker in the game on both ends of the floor when it got tough.
I know Steve Pikiell was trying to win the game, but he really did Matt Painter a favor today by mixing up so many different approaches defensively and forcing Purdue to go through multiple zone defenses, some soft pressure. They did everything basically but what North Texas did to Purdue in 2021 with a sandwich on Zach Edey. Everything else that they could face, they did, including, maybe most important of all, game pressure at the end. Purdue had to make winning plays, and they did.
Well, I think Rutgers' first half, and let's credit Purdue's defense, was just awful. They shot 26% and 0 for 8 from the three. I mean, that's a big difference for that. They came out, they got behind. They really outplayed them in the second half. They really could have got that win. Purdue dodged a bullet. I'm thinking Purdue is an outlier for them. Mason Gillis coming off the bench today to hit 2 threes when they couldn't make a three is huge. Getting guys that you can say, get in there, and he just catches it on first one and knocks it in. Those are huge advantages and outliers for teams going forward. So great win, another one like I think we saw Rutgers get the other day. Get that win and get out of there, you know, and move on to your next game because they were fortunate. They weren't upset today, Purdue.
Get home, get a good night of sleep because you know the Big Ten is coming again at least twice this week. And for Purdue, as you look at the next 5, Northwestern on Wednesday, a little bit of a revenge game, I'm guessing, at Mackey. You can see that right here on the Big Ten Network. They are at Wisconsin, home against Indiana, home against Minnesota, at Ohio State. I will say this about today. It felt different to me than in years past. Even when Rutgers made this a 2-point game, I never felt concerned as I did against FDU, as I did against St. Peter's, as I did against other games in the regular season when Purdue was supposed to win. For me, John, it comes down to Braden Smith. What makes this Purdue team different to you?
I think Lance Jones makes the big difference. He really makes a huge difference for them in what you saw. That defense, he got the steals. Just, you know, what he did today was just amazing by ended up getting the steals and contributing. I had no idea he sees the floor and shares the ball the way he does. Plus that little bit of quickness, that loose ball that you get. Sometimes in these tournament games late, it's just a possession or two that makes a difference. They didn't have Purdue didn't have more possessions today than Rutgers, but they made the most of them when they did.
Purdue is good at almost everything. Almost everything that matters on a stat sheet, they are elite. They are 15th in the nation in offensive rebounding. They are three-point percentage, they're 4th. They are 7th in block shots. About the only thing they don't do at an elite level is turn you over. They don't steal the basketball from you very often, although Lance Jones did a couple of times today. They don't turn you over. They're very mediocre at that, but that's because of the style of defense they play. They don't mind funneling you into Zach Edey so that he can block shots. So I think that's what makes them dangerous in March, is that you have a difficult time finding something to attack.
And now you have multiple guys that can make a play off the bounce without a ball screen. Braden Smith is really good with the ball screen, can come off of it, but now he's comfortable getting into his pull-up without it. And then Lance Jones, although he didn't score well in the game against Rutgers, he was able to make plays off the bounce for himself, get the ball to other shooters and find players. But there's one thing I had to nitpick against this Purdue team. It's embracing the physicality of the game. Against this game, against Rutgers, they were out-rebounded. Rutgers had 15 offensive rebounds. You can't allow good teams to have 15 second chances to score the basketball on you. So for Purdue, Caleb First, Trey Kaufman-Renn, Mason Gillis, they can't have another game this season where those 3 guys, big physical dudes, only combine for 3 rebounds. That is unacceptable. When they get into that tournament, if they can't control the glass because they don't turn people over, that could be one of the things that could hurt us.
I agree with you, but I do love Gillis's ability to knock down threes, especially with Fletcher Lawyer right now struggling a little bit. Braden Smith just looks like a more confident offensive option, which they could likely need in the NCAA tournament because I'm guessing somebody's going to send 2, if not 3 guys at Zach Edey every single possession. From standings to some next-level stats, we call these deep digits. Take a look at Indiana, the 5th tallest team in all of college basketball. Trouble is, the Hoosiers don't use that height to their advantage. They're not a good rebounding team outside the top 200 in offensive and defensive rebounding percentage. When they get to the line, they're abysmal. Just 66% from the free throw stripe. It is called the charity stripe for a reason. And their three-point attempt rate at just 27% outside the top 350 shows you they don't work inside out as you would expect a big team to do. Now, to be fair, Khalil Ware has been out for a bit. They await his return to this lineup. But, Mike, we wait, just like Mike Woodson, to figure out what the identity of this Indiana team is.
The interesting thing about some of those stats, especially the three-point attempts, is that that's really who they've been under Mike Woodson. A year ago, they ranked even lower in that percentage, and we're running out of D1 teams by the time we get to 350. There's only 362, and they ranked even lower a year ago in three-point attempt rate. And one of the interesting things I saw in looking at this was that over the last 3 years, he's only had 5 guys, and the fifth one is on track this year, Trey Galloway, to barely make 100 attempts. Purdue, which has been a very post-based team. They had Zach Edey 2 years and Zach and Trey Williams in the first year. They've had 9 guys get to 100 attempts in a year. A year ago, they had 4 on one team. So it's out there to be able to play in the post and out, but that's not what Indiana has chosen to do.
If you go back to last season with Jalen Hood-Schifino, they were playing a little more outside in, especially you go to that Purdue game in Mackey Arena. Jalen Hood-Schifino coming off of ball screens, getting to the meat of the defense, 35 points. But when you lose the number 17 draft pick, the guy that handles the basketball for you, sets the table, you're going to struggle offensively. You look at Coach Woodson, he loves to go at matchups. Whether it was 2 years ago with Trace Jackson-Davis down low, that was the best matchup every single game. Last season, if Jalen Hood-Schifino had a good matchup, he will go with that one. And this year, it just happens to be Malik Renew. And then Malik Renew doesn't have an insider, Khalil Ware. There's not a guy on the outside that without a ball screen can break down the defense, that can get in the teeth for the defense and make a play. And then they don't have a guy on the perimeter that's a 40% guy, that's a knockdown guy that you're not going to leave every single game. It's a different philosophy. It's a matchup-based philosophy. But this year, they don't have a guard every single game that can have a matchup.
It's really hard for them to win. I think their ceiling is not as high as it could be. You have to have some balance to your game, and you see all the good teams have this. They got to find that type of balance. I mean, this is really unique to this age right now to be not shooting threes, not even making a threes. They almost proved me wrong yesterday against Illinois without shooting many threes. But I think can they win this way? Yes. It's a much harder way to win. And they're going to have to become very good on the foul line if they're going to just play, inside basketball. If you're not getting at least a point of possession doing that, it's not worth it to do that. They should be getting over that. I would love to see a couple of these guys just start shooting threes, get some confidence, open up the floor.
One thing that's overlooked because it's Indiana, they are 220th in experience. They are one of the youngest teams in Division I basketball. And you should have, even in a program like Indiana, you should have the luxury to build. Now, he had a somewhat ready-made team. He had veterans like Trace Jackson-Davis when he comes. He added Jalen Hood-Schifino to that and got a lot better a year ago. But it does take time to build a program, and I think that's part of, the direction is interesting, but part of the problem is that they are very young.
And one thing I will say about playing inside dominant, you look at Maryland last season. They didn't make a bunch of three-pointers. They had Julian Reese, Dante Scott, Hakeem Hart, Jahmir Young, really dominate inside. But when they weren't making their threes, they were getting out in transition. They were using their defense to cause turnovers, getting points there. They were hitting the offensive glass, stealing second-chance baskets. That's what Indiana's not doing. They're not getting out in transition, and they're not taking advantage of the offensive glass by any means.
And listen, it's very simple. You go 0 of 9 from three-point range on the road inside the Big Ten, you're not going to win basketball games. Indiana came awfully close against Illinois on Saturday, but that's probably the biggest reason why the Hoosiers came up short trying to pick up their biggest win of the year. Plenty of history with Indiana. You'd say the same about UCLA. 36 conference titles. That combines both regular season and postseason. 19 Final Fours, and, of course, those 11 national championships. USC, Oregon, Washington, also plenty of history to be proud of. They join next year to make this an 18-team league. and it changes a lot of things for the current Big Ten members. Changes travel, changes scheduling, changes them in the sense that they get an opportunity to play at places and maybe travel to places that they've never been before. Coach Beeline said UCLA, a place that he would have liked to have gotten to a little bit more often during his coaching
February
career.
and January would be good to go from West Virginia or Michigan out there like we did. And our guys, it was like a breath of fresh air. They got off the bus, they're wearing shorts, they want to go to the beach. We always try to give them one extra day there to just get used to the travel. So it's a great venue to play, so much history. If UCLA is really good, and they've been really good, the stars come out, it's a great atmosphere. I'm thinking USC must be very similar to this. I've never been to the Northwest to see those teams, but it will be a great experience for all our players to make that trip. Recovering from it and then playing that Wednesday, if they play, that was not good to us. Coming back from that trip and that next game, I don't know if we won that next game both times that we played.
It's got my rolled-up program in honor of Coach Wooden.
There
to
you
talk
go.
About.
I like it.
I've been to Poly on multiple occasions. It is just spectacular. It's unbelievable outside on a January Saturday to be there. The atmosphere, the excitement around the game. It's a beautiful campus. Poly itself with the banners. It's just a treasure to be there. I've been to the Galen Center. It is such a great gym. It's about 8,000 people, brand new, people on top of you. It's really got good energy. I've been as well to the Alaska Airlines Arena, which we affectionately call Heck Ed. That was the old name for the gym, and it's a terrific arena. So all these buildings that they're going to are just tremendous basketball buildings. And then you've got great tradition at all those programs. It's really exciting to be bringing them into the league.
As a player, you want to go play in those gyms that have all that tradition, that have the history, especially being a Purdue player, knowing what John Wooden means to the university, being able to go out there and experience that. But I can remember when Maryland came into this league my junior season. My family's from the East Coast. My mom is from D.C. So when they came into the league, I was able to go out to Maryland my junior and senior year, got to see a bunch of family, get a bunch of support that you haven't gotten. And you think of a guy like Coleman Hawkins and different guys from the West Coast. Now they have an opportunity to go play back in front of family, play against guys that they grew up with on the AAU circuits and whatnot. It's going to be a big-time additions for the league.
One of the toughest sells for the coaches may not be getting out there and getting the travel done, getting the guys back to come to the Midwest. They want to stay on the beach in Malibu. Wouldn't everybody? And, of course, this is not just in the men's game, the women's game as well, and there's plenty of history with these women's teams. UCLA, USC, this year specifically, top 10 in the country. They're fantastic. Oregon, Washington as well. You see, these national titles, don't forget, they include both the NCAA and the AIAW. That was before the NCAA took over governance of the women's postseason. Purdue is even with Wisconsin in terms of total wins, one behind Wisconsin in the loss column, though the Boilermakers have played one additional game. And as you look down the rest of the standings, what we're going to do here is kind of take those teams that are in the top four. Those are the teams that are above 500 in the league. And we're going to basically take them off the list of opportunities as we get into this next quote-unquote selection process or draft. We're going to focus on that next tier. Teams are at 5-5, 4-5. Those are, as of right now, bubble teams. Some in, some out of Mike's bracket, but certainly all of them have work to do to feel comfortable on Selection Sunday. And what we're going to ask you guys is which players from that group of teams will have the biggest impact on whether their teams get in or are left out on Selection Sunday or could potentially impact their seeds. And Raphael, we start with you.
And I look at Rink Mass from Nebraska. You think when Rink Mass is good, the 34 points against Ohio State, the 18 points against Purdue, being able to score the ball from the perimeter, score on a block down low. But when they struggle, Rink Mass struggle. Only 4 points against Michigan State in that loss. You go to that loss last week, only 5 points against Maryland's front line. When he's confident down low and he's scoring the ball, it takes Nebraska to the next level. He's a great playmaker. He's a great finisher, but he's got to be a guy to be aggressive every single night in and night out to give Nebraska a chance.
Yeah, you can't go for 34 and then go for 5 in the next game and expect your team to think that you can give them consistency. And consistency has been the word for the guy, Mike, that you're choosing, because if you ask Tom Izzo night in and night out, who's the most important player, his answer is almost always the same. It's A.J. Hoggard.
A.J. Hoggard starts with the ball in his hands on every possession, just about. And he also guards the ball on every possession on defense. So it begins with him. These stats, are they ironclad? No, because he had a pretty decent night against Wisconsin on Friday night, and it still didn't matter. But when they lose, he shoots 36% from the field, and he shoots more. When they win, he's shooting 48% from the field, and he's only shooting about 8 times a game. So it really comes down to him running the team, directing the other players, getting players like Tyson Walker into great scoring position. This is a difficult circumstance for him because he doesn't really have a great post option right now. So it does limit his options on what he can create, how they can create. So it puts more pressure on him to generate opportunities. And a lot of teams are now sitting on his right hand. He's so good at those right-hand drives. So they sit on that and try to force him out of that. And it really does give him less opportunity to be effective.
Good news for the Spartans. They're still pretty high up in the net because of what they did, the win over Baylor in the non-conference, their strength of schedule. But there are going to be some nervous moments unless A.J. Hoggard plays well for Michigan State the rest of the way. Now, we learned on Saturday that Coach Beilein has a new man crush in Peyton Sanford. And yet, we asked him to choose which player he thought would make the biggest difference, and he went with a different Iowa player.
No, playmakers. The guards, the leaders in the backcourt, you win in February and March when your backcourt has great experience and leadership. Tony Perkins has done that all year. For 4 years, he's waited his turn. He's worked really hard. He's very consistent. He's a killer at the foul line late in the game, shooting 80%. He's got a good mid-range or inside game, shooting 50% inside 3, and he makes 1 3 a game. What I like the best about him is he doesn't give the ball to the other team. I have this metric that I wanted my point guards to limit their turnovers to once every 15 minutes. You know, and that way, if they got 6 or 8 assists, they'd be 4-to-1 ratio. This dude turns it over only every 20 minutes it takes for him to give the ball to the other team. So that's huge. And just think about the way Iowa moves up and down the floor. That's really a big stat. So I think he doesn't have to do a lot, but just lead, do what he's been doing right now. They could help. I think Iowa is trending in a good direction right now. Tony's one of those reasons.
Does he qualify as what Coach Beilein deems a computer guard, a guy who has everything over his head?
Yes, he is a computer guard. And I think that this is the first time. He hasn't always been the point there.
Yep.
But it's the guy that just understands. He can look over at Coach McCaffrey, and they know what's happening. The computer is working. We're sending things back and forth. Had so many of those over the time, and it's for a coach, it's hard to coach when you don't have that guy. Iowa's got that guy, and with all those shooters around him, I would not want to play Iowa as this goes in. They're moving in the right direction.
You're talking about for a coach. I can tell you for a host, it's great to sit in that green room because I feel smarter about basketball, just having these conversations, sometimes letting the computer go from over there to hopefully over here. Back here on Big Ten Basketball and Beyond, Rick Pizzo, Rayfeld Davis, Mike DeCourcy, Coach John Beilein. So many different ways to evaluate college basketball teams these days. Of course, we still have the traditional polls, the AP poll, the coaches poll, neither of which really has any importance when it comes to Selection Sunday, inclusion in the tournament, or your seeding. The net ranking is a very different story. It has become, if not the most important metric, certainly one of the most important inside the committee room. Strength of record, KenPom, others factor in. But you look at some of the discrepancies between the net and the SOR. Take, for example, Michigan State. The net loves the Spartans, not so much strength of record. Meanwhile, Northwestern could not get a date with net under any circumstance, even on Valentine's Day, but strength of record in love with the Cats, kind of the same scenario with Nebraska. So as we start to evaluate teams, Mike, the issue then becomes what goes into these particular metrics. And the net is a predictive metric, so margin of victory matters. And we bring that up because this week in the Big Ten, Northwestern had 2 home games. The first on Wednesday against the top 10 team in Illinois. They win and move up 4 spots. The second against Ohio State on Saturday. Nowhere close to being ranked. Northwestern wins and moves up 8 spots. And it all came down to a margin of victory scenario.
That's the strength of record, which we had up there, is a pure metric. At KPI, Kevin Paugas also is on the team sheets in the selection room. That is, those metrics are strictly how did you play in terms of wins and losses? What sort of opposition did you play? And in all cases, where was the game? Was it home, away, neutral? So that's what's in strength of record. So the other metrics like Ken Palm, or in this case the net, are including how many you won by. So I was watching Maryland on Saturday afternoon, and you saw how energetic they were at the end of games and how devoted they were to keeping that margin where they had it. And I think that had to do with making sure that their net ranking and their Ken Palm continued to climb. And there was no question in my mind, Northwestern sitting at 69 entering the game against Ohio State. Once it became established that they could win big, they wanted to win as big as possible. And that's modern basketball now. I was never in favor of going with a predictive metric having any part in the selection or seeding process for reasons like that. I've always said it takes 6 one-point victories to win the national championship, and that's how it should be decided. This is a better scenario than what we had with the RPI. The RPI was a bad metric. It was invented like in the 1930s or whatever, and it just wasn't any good. This is better, but it's not what it should be if it includes you having to sit there and worry about how many you win by.
And we were showing the top 8 teams inside the Big Ten because those are inside the top 70 in the net. And if you're outside the top 70 in the net, you have almost no chance to get into the tournament. But to get higher and higher, you need to win by more and more. And, John, you think that can have a negative effect on some of the guys sitting on the bench?
No, I don't like that part at all. I just think it's so much bigger than that in basketball and the relationships you have with your teammates. My favorite moments, and I think the team's favorite moments, would be when the guys on our scout teams, just tremendous young men that give their all and very rarely have any chance to play, they can't go in now to the 1 minute mark, and then it's one possession and dribble it out. It's not fair to them. When you're up by 20, with 4 minutes to go, 3 minutes to go, you should be able to empty that bench, right? And so what if you win by 10? You rewarded some of the best young men in the world, and they got to play, and it helps the whole team. So it was sportsmanship involved with everything, not taking your starters out when you're out by 20 because you want to maintain that. I don't think it's good for the game in the big run. It's part of it. I'm sure we can do better than this in order to find the right way.
Yeah, I don't think it's good for the game either. I don't think the basketball guys enjoy this type of play. You look at the walk-ons that are on a team. My roommate, my senior year, he was a walk-on, and that was some of our funnest moments after those games where he get checked in, he may get a bucket, whether he make it or miss it. We're going to have some fun with it. You think back to Purdue, Tommy Luce, the king of Mackey. If he doesn't have those moments at the end of those games, he's not remembered in that same light.
Look at Steven Izzo, what Steven Izzo did.
Hey, Rayfeld said that changed Michigan State's entire season.
It could. You just watch those things. Those things are right there in front of us, and we're taking them away from it by not being able to give guys time. Because really, it's one possession they get maybe right now. There's a better way. There's a better way.
Go ahead, Mike.
It's important to remember that these metrics are used not just to put you in the field. It's really it's a base that they use to measure teams. How did you do against the teams that are ranked high? But at the end of the day, it really does matter in where you're seated.
Yes.
And a team like Northwestern, they've beaten 3 top 10 teams, top 15 teams. They think they can go somewhere in March. They sure as heck don't want to be seated in an 8-9 game or an 11 or 12. They want to be up at 6 or 7 and have a chance to go far. And that's where it really matters.
Well, you just can't convince me, and I know you want to get one more comment in here. You cannot convince me that there are 60 teams in the country right now that are better than Northwestern. That's what the net believes with Northwestern ranked 61st.
Yeah, you think about how Michigan State beat Baylor. You put a lot into that game, but I strongly believe it's harder to beat a good team in a close game. You think of Northwestern against Purdue in the overtime game. That's so much harder to beat a Purdue team, a disciplined team, the #1 team in the country in your gym. All of your guys have to play well. No one can have a drop-off. But then when you blow a team out like Michigan did Baylor, when they got up big, Baylor just quit. They stopped playing the game. They started playing the score, and Michigan State kind of sailed off to that win.
And the other team could say, okay, I'm going to teach Raleigh Massimino wanted to teach his team a lesson way back when Pitt buried him, right?
Yes.
He took all his starters out and said, to heck with it. I'm going to save you guys. And, you know, Pitt buried them, but it made Villanova won the national championship. You can't do that today. You can't. You got to keep that up there.
And listen, I'm not a Northwestern alum, but we did start this conversation with Northwestern. We'll end it that way as well. Why are they 61 in the net? 2 words. Chicago State, a loss to one of the worst teams in the country, still hanging over the Wildcats, at least in terms of the net, like an albatross. To those who try to say you can't quantify the clutch gene, I share with you the statistics of Maryland's Jahmir Young. In clutch time, which is defined by the final 5 minutes of a game or a game that goes into overtime with the score separated by 6 points or less, Young is better than anybody in the country. He averages more than a point per minute in those situations, shoots better than 50%, and you want to put him on the line? Good luck to you and your team, because he is 28 of 29 from the stripe when it matters the most. That is the dictionary definition of clutch. It is also how we start this week's edition of Advanced Scout. And when you look at Jahmir Young, he is exactly the prototype of the guy that you want, if you're a coach on the sideline, to have the ball in his hands in a game that's yet to be decided.
Jahmir Young is an absolute bucket all game long. But when that game gets close in the crunch time, you want the basketball in his hands because you know he's going to make plays for himself and for others. You go back to that Northwestern game. 36 points on the night. 28 of them came in that second half. And he had 15 of the final 19 points in the final 8 minutes for Northwestern. The Iowa game, the same. 17 points in the second half of his 22. And you go to that final 90 seconds of the game when Maryland made a push. Jahmir Young had 8 of the points in the final 90 seconds of the game. 2 big threes, got downhill to that left hand for game. When the game is on the line, Jahmir Young has that delusional confidence that helps you win basketball games. He can make an open three. He can get to a pull-up, get to his floater, get downhill, finish through contact, and then he's money at the free throw line. Jahmir Young has been awesome all season long.
See, it's not delusional if you believe it and you can back it up, which is exactly what Jahmir Young does. Sometimes we have conversations about the all-irrational confidence team. Young has rational confidence, and he has it in buckets, but he also has a running mate. Because when Julian Reese-John is really good, as he was on Saturday against Nebraska when he went for 15 and 16, there's just not a lot of bigs that can match up with him, not just because of his size, but because of his freakish athleticism.
He's so quick, and he's averaging a double-double right now. He's trending from his freshman year on. Now he's getting almost 2.5 blocks a game, which is really good. He's a guy like some bigs you could really use their height to disadvantage by stretching them on the perimeter. He can get out on the perimeter and guard and stay between people. I just love his movement right now. So watch this. We got some great tape of him right now. Here's where he ends up coming off and catching the ball right there. Now that's a blind catch. You see, catches on the half turn, gathers himself, sees the defense, and hits a mid-range. That's hard to do for big guys. Watch, you want to press their mask on the outside so he can't shoot. Here he gets out and makes him a non-passer, steals the ball, and watch this full court going end to end to get his thing. He's got to shoot foul shots better. He shot 80% as a freshman, and now he's in the 50s. So here's a great thing where he comes in and out to help. There's a ball screen defense. Watch this again. They're going to go in a ball screen. He's going to help off the ball screen with a little bit of a drop. Watch, his feet are in the paint, and now he can still get the three, change the shot. I guarantee you, Mast was never the same the rest of the game as far as shooting threes. That affects people when you get that shot blocked. You say, wow, he was in the paint, and he still got that shot. Mast wouldn't think about shooting after that.
Maryland needs its veterans to be great. Dante Scott, another. But they also need the freshmen. We saw that in the Nebraska game. We saw Deshaun Harris-Smith shoot 4 of 6 from the field. So he was both judicious and accurate. That has not always been the case this year, but he is learning. That's what freshmen are supposed to do. And then Jamie Kaiser coming in and nailing 4 out of 5 three-pointers. That was a game changer for the Terps in that Nebraska game, which was a really important game for them if they're going to get serious about contending for the league as well as making a run to March. They need to have those 2 freshmen and others continue to step forward and learn, and I think that's a great step for the Terps.
Here's how I know that Raphael is a former Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, because you saw Reese on that run out, great move. Raphael got a little bit excited. You showed the clip of him in the paint and then out to block Mass three-pointer. Raphael was almost grabbing me with excitement. He said, that's the kind of guy that we want to see more of. Focus on defense on the Big Ten Network. Listen, Kevin Willard and these Terps, they play defense like that. They're a team that nobody wants to see because of Young and Reese. They certainly have some work to do, but now back in the conversation to potentially get back to the NCAA tournament.